SCP-3780. Who shot JFK? Object Class: Keter. Special Containment Procedures. The Temporal Anomalies Department is assumed to be in charge of ensuring containment of SCP-3780. They have been granted indefinite Level 5 clearance to all Foundation task forces and resources under the condition that said resources be either returned or replaced within 1 standard minute of deployment, relative to local time of requisition. Description: SCP-3780 describes the collective attempts by various individuals, third parties, and separate temporal versions of the Foundation to prevent the assassination of United States President John Fitzgerald Kennedy by Lee Harvey Oswald on the 22nd of November, 1963. Although no significant changes to the timeline would actually occur if Kennedy's assassination were successfully prevented, the objective of the Foundation to preserve original consensus reality extends to the preservation of a single objective timeline within this reality. Therefore, the Temporal Anomalies Department has established Operation Thunderbolt, an indefinite program to ensure that Kennedy is shot to death by Oswald at 12:30 p.m. on Friday, the 22nd of November 1963, in Dallas, Texas. To this end, Temporal Anomalies has established a holding ground between 2220 and 2230 AD to store resources and personnel for Operation Thunderbolt as needed. Further details on Operation Thunderbolt are limited to Temporal Anomalies personnel for paradoxical reasons. Addendum: Notable attempts at preventing Kennedy's assassination. Date: November 22, 1963. Attempt: A gunman hiding in the Texas School Book Depository shoots Oswald dead before he can shoot Kennedy. Sweeps by the department ahead of time to locate the gunman fail. However, department personnel observing from the so-called grassy knoll are able to spot the gunman moving through the building from their position. Preventative measures: A sniper placed on the grassy knoll is able to spot the gunman moving through the building and incapacitate him with a gut shot. Department personnel hiding in the building are subsequently able to locate the gunman. However, before they can recover his body, it abruptly vanishes. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: At 12:29 p.m., Oswald abruptly vanishes from his hiding point in the Texas Book Depository. Personnel surveying the scene are unable to locate any trace of him. At 12:42 p.m., he reappears in the depository, by which time the motorcade is passed. From Oswald's perspective, no time has passed and he is unable to explain the lost time. Preventative measures: As soon as Oswald reappears at 12:42, a temporal relocation specialist transfers Oswald to 12:29 p.m., synchronizing him with the exact time of his disappearance. Oswald remains unaware of his relocation and successfully makes the shot. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: An agent of Marshall, Carter & Dark retroactively aborts Oswald by infiltrating the home of his mother, Margaret Frances Claverie, and slipping a capsule of powdered unicorn horn into the jug of milk in her fridge. Preventative measures: 2 Temporal Anomalies agents stake out Claverie's home overnight. In the early morning, they are able to intercept and subdue the MC&D agent and recover her for interrogation without incident. The capsule of unicorn horn is confiscated successfully. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: While Dr. Thaddeus Zank is observing Oswald under the cover of an SCP field, his future self barges into the room, renders Zank unconscious with a punch to the jaw, and pushes him into a portable temporal relocation gateway. However, The fields are momentarily disrupted by the impact of the punch, causing both Zanks to be noticed by Oswald and throwing off his aim. Preventative measures. Dr. Yank returns to the moment in time when he was incapacitated by his future self. However, he chooses to arrive 5 seconds after his future self arrives in the room. Zank subsequently incapacitates his future self with a punch to the jaw and pushes him through the temporal relocation gateway instead. However, his future self repeats the actions, appearing 5 seconds after him, incapacitating him, and pushing him into the gateway. Unwilling to accept defeat, both Zanks repeat this process several more times until both of them only appear after Oswald has successfully shot and killed Kennedy, at which point the two Zanks agree to a truce. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: a version of Mobile Task Force Tau-5 is dispatched by the Foundation of the Year 20 Redacted to eliminate Oswald with extreme prejudice. Temporal Anomalies personnel attempt to prevent them from doing so. They are repeatedly unsuccessful and suffer heavy casualties as well. Preventative measures. Mobile Task Force Tau-5 is dispatched to protect Oswald by intercepting and eliminating their future selves. Although they are initially successful in doing so, the surviving Nanku asset is found to be from the 20 Redacted Foundation. She is subsequently reprogrammed to replace her past counterpart. Diplomatic channels have been opened with the 20 Redacted Foundation to ascertain the reasoning for attempting to eliminate Oswald. No future attempts at using Tau-5 are expected. Addendum: SCP-3780 Extended Incident Log. This document contains all currently classified incident logs regarding SCP-3780 and the Department of Temporal Anomalies Operation Thunderbolt. Temporal Anomalies personnel are to use the following format when filing declassified logs. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: preventative measures. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: at some point between 6 a.m. and 12 p.m., Oswald is surreptitiously swapped with an Anderson's robotic Saker unit. The deception is not discovered until 12:30 p.m., when the Saker fails to shoot Kennedy and attempts to flee. Upon incapacitation, the unit is discovered. Preventative measures. Temporal Anomalies personnel move Lee Harvey Oswald forward in time from 5:50 a.m. to 12:01 p.m. The Saker unit pretending to be Oswald at 12:01 p.m. is incapacitated and transferred to Oswald's bedroom at 5:59 a.m. Oswald is then subjected to a pre-prepared hypnotherapy regimen and prepped for assassination, which then proceeds as scheduled. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: an instance of SCP-1746 forms over Dallas, forcing the presidential motorcade to be cancelled as a result of the storm. The resulting storm pattern devastates the city. Preventative measures. In the original variant of the timeline in which this incident took place, the waffle cone had not yet been invented, and the requisite frozen dairy confectionery to prevent SCP-1746 from forming did not exist. Thus, the Department of Temporal Anomalies sent agents to the 1904 World's Fair in Chicago to introduce and popularize the dessert, which would ensure the existence of the waffle cone in time for its use to prevent SCP-1746 prior to the presidential motorcade. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: at 11:47 a.m., 100 instances of the individual known as Allison Chow stormed the Texas Book Depository, overrunning all posted guards as well as subsequent reinforcements. Temporal measurements of the depository suggest that each instance is a version of Allison Chow separated temporally by a single second relative to the original Chow's base time period. Each instance is uniquely prepared to handle part of the department's countermeasures. Together, they are able to continually overcome the department's protective measures and kill Oswald. Preventative measures. The Department of Temporal Anomalies contacts each instance of Chow and provides her with different partial information regarding redacted in exchange for betraying her associates. As a result, the offensive fails at 11:48 a.m. as the Chows turn on each other. At 12:03, the surviving Chows temporally evacuate the area. Oswald is dosed with a mild amnestic to ensure that he forgets the events of the raid and successfully assassinates Kennedy on time. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: At 9:31 a.m., an unknown assailant poses as a Secret Service agent and covertly bites President Kennedy. Simultaneously, at 9:31 a.m., the same assailant laces Oswald's bullet with lunar regolith. When the bullet impacts Kennedy's head, the president transforms into a werewolf, regenerates the bullet wound, and begins harassing pedestrians. Preventative measures. Prior to the planting of regolith, agents of the Department of Temporal Anomalies substitute Oswald's ammunition for bullets composed of a silver alloy. The assassination proceeds as expected, and evidence of Kennedy's lycanthropy is suppressed post-mortem. Due to differences in density, the silver bullet experienced a flight path and penetration profile slightly altered from what would be expected for a typical bullet fired from that angle. This detail is sufficiently minor that its likelihood of being noted by civilian observers is extremely low. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: At 12:25 p.m., an entity identical to nightclub owner and Oswald assassin Jack Ruby somehow breaches temporal department defenses of the Texas Book Depository. Entity identifies itself as Lee Harold Oswald to guards who allow it to pass uninhibited, without concern for the situation. Entity discovers Oswald, and the two begin to kiss and then have sex, distracting Oswald from his position, killing Kennedy. Personnel either took no notice of this, or seemingly did not consider the situation unusual until a cephalopodic tentacle emerges from the Ruby entity's torso and stabbed Oswald in the heart. At that moment, personnel realized what was happening and decided to intervene. The Ruby entity reportedly exclaimed, "That's all, folks," and vanished. Preventative measures. Oswald's injuries were found to be minor, with no evidence of chest wounds or heart wounds found, despite contrary appearance. After brief medical treatment, the assassination proceeds as planned. At the time of his death, Jack Ruby was found to have no anomalous qualities. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: At 5:30 a.m., both Jacqueline Kennedy and Lady Bird Johnson appear to quickly gain large amounts of weight and then just as quickly lose them. At 6:08 that evening, Patricia Johnson McMillan, footnote 1, a journalist who interviewed both Kennedy and Oswald in her career, and later became a close family friend of Marina Oswald, is found wandering the side of a highway near Ciudad Teco, Bogota, Colombia, with a typed note in her coat pocket reading, "That's where it's at. Looks like the First Ladies lost the Battle of the Bulge." At 8:30 p.m., the corpse of a 17-year-old teenager, identical to Lee Harvey Oswald at that age, was found dead on another highway outside Dallas, smeared in pig lard. Oswald himself was not affected. Preventative measures. Due to the anomaly's non-interference with the actual assassination, the Temporal Department only records the events as related to the central anomaly. It is theorized that this was an unusual and unsuccessful attempt to halt the assassination by an unknown party. All related persons issued Class B amnestics. Following the assassination, Ciudad Teco Bogota was renamed to Ciudad Kennedy. The significance of this is unknown. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: the assassination proceeds as usual until Oswald opens fire. He fires several rounds, missing each time. One shot wounds a bystander. President Kennedy's motorcade accelerates and escapes to safety. After the incident, Oswald is detained and found to be heavily inebriated. An unknown temporal agent had made contact with him earlier in the morning and purchased a large number of drinks for him. Preventative measures: tachyonic interference around the bar in which the unknown agent plied Oswald with the drinks makes prevention of his alcohol consumption untenable. Oswald is placed within a Class II non-causal temporal loop until he is sober. He is then dosed with amnestics and returned to the Texas Book Depository in time to complete the assassination. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: a suitcase which contained a miniaturized thermonuclear device with a yield of 1.2 megatons of TNT, technology anachronistic for 1963, was discovered in the Texas Book Depository. It was accompanied by a note which read, "Dear Foundation, fuck it." Device detonated shortly before assassination could be completed, killing Oswald, the president, all present personnel, and an unknown number of civilians. Preventative measures: experts in thermonuclear ordnance sent back to defuse weapon before detonation. Assassination proceeds as usual. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: a prepubescent spectator throws a rock onto Dealey Plaza shortly before the motorcade passes. As Oswald begins firing, the president's limousine swerves slightly to avoid the rock. Kennedy is then only hit once, a non-fatal shot to his left shoulder, before the motorcade escapes to safety. Preventative measures: a temporal anomalies agent grabbed the rock from the spectator's hand. Interrogation revealed no anomalous compulsions and no further motivations beyond juvenile mischief. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: on the morning of November 22nd, Oswald spontaneously developed the inability to physically touch any object he would perceive or attempt to use as a weapon. When instructed to damage a table with the plate he was currently holding, Oswald was immediately unable to hold the plate any longer. Preventative measures: a temporal duplicate of Oswald was extracted from 3:21:06 a.m. the same day, who displayed no anomalous abilities. Oswald too was able to successfully carry out the assassination. Oswald 2 proceeded along the correct chain of events and was returned upon the shooting of J.D. Tippit and replaced by Oswald 1. Temporal agents posed as police and federal agents until the death of Oswald 1 by Jack Ruby. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: on the morning of November 22nd, the planned route for the presidential motorcade route was found to be blocked by a massive pile of apple seeds. Preventative measures: after the route was cleared of obstructions, Dr. King was found to have been temporally displaced from April 12, 2020. Interviews with Dr. King revealed no insight as to how he arrived up in 1963 and was returned to his original temporal coordinates without further incident. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: several hours before the planned departure of the motorcade, all vehicles capable of participation are dismantled, then reassembled incorrectly so as to immediately cause irreparable damage upon an attempt to start the engine. Preventative measures: all damaged vehicles are replaced before any White House personnel perform pre-event checks. Assassination otherwise unaffected. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: On redacted, SCP-946-1 and SCP-946-2 began to argue about the probability of Oswald's shot, saying that Oswald was a pretty bad shot back when he served in the Marine Corps. His rifle was not very accurate, and it was a very, very great distance. Either Oswald hit a 1 in a million shot, or someone's lying. Oswald was seen to demanifest 5 minutes before the assassination could take place. Preventative measures. Temporal Anomalies personnel were successful in intercepting SCP-946 before the argument could take place. The assassination proceeds as normal. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: At the moment Oswald begins to fire on the motorcade, Kennedy is instantaneously replaced by his son, John Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr., as he was on July 16, 1999, moments before his fatal plane crash near Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. On July 21, 1999, the Foundation reaches out to its contacts in the UIU, who confirmed that the body pulled from the pilot's seat of the wreckage belonged to President Kennedy, dressed as he was at the moment he vanished in 1963. There is no other reported change to the timeline of events that originally led to Kennedy Jr.'s death. Footnote 2. This attempt leaves neither man alive long enough to make any impact on their new place in history, but Operation Thunderbolt protocols require that all efforts to be made to preserve the Kennedy assassination as it originally happened. It is believed that this was a botched attempt to replace Kennedy with a more expendable blood relative. Preventative measures. Both Kennedys are taken into custody by Temporal Anomalies agents before their respective deaths. John F. Kennedy Jr. is brought to November 22, 1963, and after a painstaking regimen of amnestics and brainwashing, he eventually manages to mimic his father's words and actions from the morning of his assassination. The unconscious President Kennedy is brought to July 16, 1999, and strapped into his son's pilot's seat at 8:40 p.m., just after Kennedy Jr.'s final known transmission. Passengers Caroline and Lauren Bassett are tranquilized and left in their seats. Agents then operate the plane remotely and guide it to its prescribed crash site. After some trial and error, the Kennedys eventually switch places at the right moment to die in the time, place, and manner dictated by baseline reality. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: Immediately prior to Oswald's first shot, a large gust of wind carries an umbrella directly into his line of sight. This momentary distraction allows the umbrella to be carried to the 6th floor window, where it is revealed to be an instance of SCP-803-1, which attacks and kills Oswald. Analysis of post-shooting footage reveals the wind was generated by an unidentified woman utilizing thaumaturgic abilities. Preventative measures. 2 agents are dispatched to location of unidentified woman before the shooting in order to intercept her. Agent Palmer is able to confiscate SCP-803-1 instance and incapacitate it after a brief struggle, but the person of interest escapes by activating away. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: At 2:23 a.m., an emergency session of the O5 Council was called by O513. In attendance were 37 counselors, 3 instances of O51 through O512, and 1 O513. All instances passed authentication protocols. Once in session, the matter of the assassination of President Kennedy was raised, in which the following pattern emerged. For each set of counselors, one was native to 1963, one claimed to be from a future in which Kennedy was assassinated, and one claimed to be from a future in which he survived. Each set of future counselors attempted to persuade the council that Kennedy's assassination or survival while not consequential to significant future events, should be preserved in the interest of maintaining consensus reality. After an extremely contentious debate, a vote was held, 18 in favor of assassination and 18 in favor of survival, with the split among the Temporal natives falling roughly along pre-existing political affiliation. 0513 was called upon to break the tie and did so by means of a coin flip. Preventative measures. Operation Thunderbolt is directed to ensure that President John F. Kennedy is assassinated at 12:30 p.m. on November 22, 1963. Date: November 22, 1963. Attempt: At 11:15 a.m., President Kennedy reported severe chest pain and collapsed aboard Air Force One while en route to Dallas Love Field. Onboard medical personnel were unable to prevent Kennedy from expiring due to cardiac arrest. Preventative measures. Temporal agents extracted the president mid-flight from 11:12 a.m. to a secure Foundation medical facility. Subsequent medical intervention successfully prevented expiry by utilizing anachronistic treatment methods to remove an abnormal tumorous growth found rapidly expanding within the pericardial cavity. Following recovery and amnesticization, the president was returned to 11:12 a.m., experiencing only minor disorientation. The assassination proceeds as normal. Date: November 22, 1963. Attempt: Assassination proceeded as normal. At 12:31 p.m., a second instance of President Kennedy, Kennedy B, emerged from the ship's lounge bar, approximately 3 miles northeast of the assassination site. Kennedy B claimed that he had been transported from Dealey Plaza to the men's restroom of the bar by some unknown force. Investigation showed that Kennedy B materialized in the restroom at the exact moment that Oswald's bullet struck the primary Kennedy instance, Kennedy A. Preventative measures. Agents intercepted Kennedy B before he could exit the restroom and detained him in a Class Redacted temporal stasis loop. This detention will continue until further notice. No, you do not get to slack off just because we have a spare now. That's a last resort option. Dr. Moldenhauer. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: An unidentified male bearing armor with the Operation Thunderbolt logo attacked President Kennedy with a broken temporal sink. Preventative measures. The Operation Thunderbolt logo was changed. Yes, I know it looks like that the containment procedures may be causing SCP-3780 at this point. I've dealt with this kind of paradox before. We just have to wait until an esoteric year to find out. Until then, we will keep Operation Thunderbolt to prolong temporal alterations as long as possible. Dr. Rydell. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: At 2:29 p.m., every vehicle in John F. Kennedy's motorcade was seen accelerating to an extreme speed, eventually reaching 486 kilometers per hour, then smashing into an abandoned building at the very end of the street due to lack of control. Preventative measures. 2 temporal agents dispatched to replace vehicles before motorcade began. Assassination continues as usual. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: During a test with SCP-3922 on September 10, 2019, it was placed in front of a recording of John F. Kennedy's assassination. It is only assumed Oswald was arrested and/or killed. Preventative measures. The recording was taken out before SCP-3922 took action. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: At 2:23 a.m., an emergency session of the O5 Council was called by O513. In attendance were 37 counselors, 3 instances each of 051 through 0512 and 0513. All instances passed authentication protocols. Once in session, the matter of the assassination of President Kennedy was raised, in which the following pattern emerged. For each set of counselors, one was native to 1963, one claimed to be from a future in which Kennedy was assassinated, and one claimed to be from a future in which he survived. Each set of future counselors attempted to persuade the council that Kennedy's assassination or survival, while not consequential to significant future events, should be preserved in the interest of maintaining consensus reality. After an extremely contentious debate, a vote was held. 18 in favor of assassination and 18 in favor of survival, with a split among the temporal natives falling roughly along pre-existing political affiliation. 0513 was called upon to break the tie, and did so by means of a coin flip. The coin landed tails, causing consensus reality to become one in which President Kennedy survives the assassination attempt. Preventative measures. Prior to the meeting, a temporal anomalies agent replaced 0513's coin with an anomalous coin that lands heads on 100% of flips. After the meeting, the coin was replaced again with the non-anomalous coin. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: At 2:23 a.m., an emergency session of the 05 Council was called by 0513. In attendance were 37 counselors, 3 instances each of 051 through 0512 and 1 0513. All instances passed authentication protocols. Once in session, the matter of the assassination of President Kennedy was raised, in which the following pattern emerged. For each set of counselors, one was native to 1963, one claimed to be from a future in which Kennedy was assassinated, and one claimed to be from a future in which he survived. Each set of future counselors attempted to persuade the council that Kennedy's assassination or survival, while not consequential to significant future events, should be preserved in the interest of maintaining consensus reality. After an extremely contentious debate, a vote was held. 18 in favor of assassination and 18 in favor of survival, with the split among the temporal natives falling roughly along pre-existing political affiliation. 0513 was called upon to break the tie, and did so by means of a coin flip. The coin landed tails, causing consensus reality to become one in which President Kennedy survives the assassination attempt. Temporal anomalies agent Jackson attempts to replace 0513's coin with an anomalous coin that landed heads on 100% of flips prior to the meeting. However, Jackson's coin was replaced with an anomalous coin that landed tails on 100% of flips by another temporal anomalies agent, presumably from a different iteration of the Foundation. Preventative measures. Temporal anomalies agents located and apprehended the alternate temporal anomalies agent and returned the 100% heads anomalous coin to Agent Jackson before the meeting. The temporal anomalies agents attempted to bring the alternate agent into custody for questioning, but before they could, a second alternate version of Agent Jackson materialized and assassinated the agent. The second alternate Agent Jackson dematerialized before they could be apprehended by the temporal agents. Date: November 22nd, 1963. Attempt: A radical shift in the timeline occurs, ensuring the prevention of several key factors in the assassination, most notably that Kennedy is no longer president. From November 9th, 1943, Temporal Anomalies makes contact with itself to report an alteration to the timeline where an SCP-3721 successfully bombs several Russian cities. Subsequently, Temporal Anomalies is contacted by itself from July 19, 1969, reporting that the Soviet Union has unexpectedly landed a man on the moon. A temporal audit suggests, for unclear reasons, The April 15, 1970 iteration of Pentagram, footnote 3, the occult branch of the Department of Defense, plotted to ensure a Soviet victory in the space race, as well as the subsequent declaration of war by the United States through a series of extensive changes to the timeline. This, incidentally, retroactively ensured that Kennedy would not be assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald. For a detailed list of alterations, see Incident Report 3780 ABS Goldwater. Preventative measures. Agents from all three departments collaborate to nullify such changes to the best of their abilities. Partway through the process, all three agencies exhaust their budgetary resources, requiring a loan from the Temporal Anomalies Department of $1436.2155. Due to the hyperinflation experienced by global markets in the SCP GOC Collective's timeline, all three of the previous iterations are paid at far greater rates than contemporarily necessary. Thaumaturgists at the Federal Reserve System flag this transaction, but do not halt it, leading to a sharp drop in the valuation of USD at 3 points in the history of the United States. Temporal auditing suggests that this radicalizes the Temporal Anomalies Department of July 21, 1969 against the Foundation, leading to mass defections to the Chaos Insurgency. In response, the Chaos Insurgency's own Temporal Anomalies Department begins an extensive campaign against the SCP Foundation, leading to their dissolution on January 2, 1924. At this point, members of the now non-existent Temporal Anomalies Department make hurried attempts at ensuring their existence. This culminates in the formation of the American Secure Containment Initiative, from which a new temporal instance of the SCP Foundation is eventually formed. Additionally, due to a quirk in its formation, Pentagram is retroactively made a successor organization to the ASCI, and embedded agents are able to successfully prevent it from enacting the alterations it had performed in the original timeline. At this point, aspects of the original timeline are preserved to a statistically anomalous extent. The exception is the Apollo 11 mission, which the Foundation is forced to fake. Date: November 22, 1963. Attempt: 5 minutes before the assassination takes place, a Class 2 temporal portal opens at Site 19. Several personnel exit from the portal, explaining that their timeline had suffered an Omega K class end-of-death scenario, and so they had opened the portal under the hope that connecting their timeline to one which hadn't experienced such a scenario would cause death to return to their timeline. However, the effect was actually the opposite, causing Baseline to suffer an Omega K class scenario as well. As death was now impossible, Oswald failed to kill Kennedy. Preventative measures. The Temporal Anomalies Department could not stop the arrival of the alternate Foundation personnel, as it was believed that any temporal interaction with the point in time before the opening of the temporal portal would simply result in the Omega K class scenario spreading to that point in time. After negotiations with the alternate timeline, they agreed to travel back in their own timeline in order to prevent the opening of the temporal portal from their side. As a result, the Omega K class scenario never occurred in Baseline, and the assassination proceeded as normal. Date: November 22, 1963. Attempt: in an apparent attempt to end the temporal conflict, the Temporal Anomalies Department created an inclusive tautological loop beginning 12 a.m. the day of the successful assassination of Kennedy by Oswald and ending immediately upon his death in the motorcade. Theoretically, any real or attempted alteration to the loop's preset chronology would produce a closed anti-paradoxical event progression, where in reality inside the looped region of time would spontaneously adjust to inevitably resolve in the successful assassination of Kennedy by Oswald in zero time outside the loop, thus automatically containing attempts to ensure Kennedy's survival while maintaining an undistorted linear progression of time throughout the assassination. This countermeasure was apparently successful. However, upon the commencement of disruption to the chronology by unknown actors, the loop entered a stack overflow type iterative event. The ability of pro-survival parties to deploy countermeasures to the temporally fixed space-time region from temporally arbitrary futures inside a zero-time retrocausal loop caused infinite iterations of countermeasures and resolutions to be produced inside the loop. Infinite insertions of individually benign temporal distortions caused local space-time inside the loop to begin topologically expanding beyond linear directions at a non-computationally solvable rate until threatening the spatial integrity of time outside the loop. Preventative measures. Alternate versions of Temporal Anomalies Department agents, redacted and redacted, appeared to themselves attempting to construct the loop at 11:45 November 21st, 1963, to explain to themselves the previously stated complications in the proposed containment strategy. Alternate agents presented the remains of redacted device as evidence of their authenticity. Alternate agents dematerialized upon redacted and redacted's decision to abandon the attempt at containment. Thank you for listening to SCP-3780, Who Shot JFK by a Random Day, and the extended incident log by multiple contributors. If you enjoyed this SCP, please like and subscribe, and follow the links in the description of the SCP Wiki, and vote up the articles to support the authors and the SCP Wiki as a whole.